do you introduce a piece of media that, as far as most people are concerned, doesn't exist? What can you even talk about? What kind of story can be told? Is it even possible to discuss an album that's impossible to hear? Godspeed You Black Emperor is a post-rock band from Canada, specifically Montreal, and they've been around in some capacity for a little over 20 years, and in that time they've released some of the most legendary albums of the late 90s and early 2000s. The band's structure is incredibly unique, consisting of 9 members as of writing, and early in the band's life, membership was somewhat of a revolving door. It was like if anyone knew anybody who played an instrument and seemed like an okay person, they would sort of join up. Most of their albums only consist of about 3 or 4 songs, and those songs can last up to 20 minutes. The music is also almost entirely instrumental, with the only vocals being the occasional sample, sometimes coming from things like news broadcasts, and other times just coming from field recordings of people on the street.
And we used to sleep on the beach here. Sleep overnight. They don't do it anymore. Things changed. See? They don't sleep anymore on the beach.
It's impossible to talk about Godspeed without mentioning their political message. Godspeed is undoubtedly a political band, and they hate capitalism. Their latest album, Luciferian Towers, for example, comes with a list of demands. An end to foreign invasion, an end to borders, the total dismantle of the prison industrial complex, healthcare, housing, food, and water acknowledged as an inalienable human right, and the expert fuckers who broke the world never get to speak again. On the back of their album, Yankee UXO, there's a diagram depicting the major record label's ties to the military-industrial complex. The group is critical of the state of the world, to say the least. All music is political, right? You either make music that pleases the king and his court, or you make music for the serfs outside the walls. Before each of their live sets, the band plays a long drone piece accompanied by ominous images projected on the walls behind them, with the word hope flickering on screen. Hope is a consistent motif in their music, specifically a balance of fear and hope. Dreary and depressing imagery engulfs the entire stage, but the flickering of hope is still the most striking element, even if it only lasts for a few frames at a time. A depressing track like Dead Flag Blues can open with a monologue that sounds like this.
The car is on fire, and there's no driver at the wheel. And the sewers are all muddied with 1,000 lonely suicides. And a dark wind blows.
But then the song can end like this. Fear and hope. It's kind of optimistic, really. Even in the darkest times politically, they can still cling to this idea of hope, that things will get better. A thing a lot of people got wrong about us when we did it the first time. A whole lot of what we were about was joy. We tried to make heavy music joyously. Times were heavy, but the party line was everything was okay. That's the Godspeed that we have now. The albums you can buy and the band that you can see live, which I highly recommend, by the way. But what about the Godspeed that we don't have? The one that we know we can't have? On the Discogs Marketplace, there is a tab to search for the most requested albums. Under the cassette category, you'll find stuff like Always, Black Flag, and Hellhammer, but if you scroll down just a bit, you'll find an album that likely no one will ever hear. All Lights Fucked on the Harry Amp Drooling by Godspeed You Black Emperor. In 1994, the album All Lights Fucked on the Harry Amp Drooling was released. I should use the term released loosely, because only 33 copies were made, and those copies were mostly given to friends of the band. So this is one of the most requested albums on the internet, and it comes from one of the most legendary bands of all time. But here's the thing, what if the album isn't even good? From what we know, the album doesn't sound anything like the Godspeed we have now. For instance, it has vocals, and the band only had 3 members. Basically, with everything we know about the album, it just kinda sounds unappealing, and I think the band would agree with me. There's not much to say about it. It was recorded before there were 9 people in Godspeed, and it's only really related by name. It's pretty good, but it's not great. I think it's mostly interesting because it's a product of its time. And that was a weird time for music back then. There was nothing going on, so it's interesting on that level. But musically, I don't know how much value it has. I mean, they're singing on it. It's interesting to think that one of the most wanted albums ever probably isn't even that good. Godspeed carries a lot of mystery with them, and they give very few interviews. They have no press photos, and they release music very rarely, and without a lot of build-up. They don't even talk during their shows. They just show up, play their set, and leave. This ominous and reserved aspect of the band is definitely part of the appeal behind All Lights. It's not so much about the sound, it's more like solving a mystery. It's tricky because it doesn't bear any relation to what Godspeed did. It would be hard to put it out without people feeling ripped off. I wouldn't want someone buying it thinking they were getting a Godspeed record, only to find out it's something completely different. And here's the thing, we almost had it. In 2013, a Reddit user with the tag cked posted that he had a copy. He said it was sold to him in the early 90s and he didn't like it, so he kept it stored away until one day, going through a collection of old demo tapes, he found the album and he asked the people of r/music on Reddit what to do with it. The internet understandably blew up. The most coveted lost album is nearly in our grasp, and all he had to do was upload it. However, based on the comments, working with cked seemed exhaustive. Cked was hesitant to release the album, and the attention that the post was getting took him by surprise. And that uneasiness was only amplified by the numerous abusive comments he got. Cked was also worried about any legal ramifications that would come from ripping the album, so he just told everyone to wait. His plan was to email Constellation Records and ask permission to upload the album. He said that once he heard back from them, we would hear from him. He deleted his account shortly after, presumably due to more abusive comments and PMs. The thread is still available, and I do recommend reading through it, but it is rather depressing. And that's how we almost got All Lights fucked on the Harry Amp Drooling. Well, sort of. cked did give us something. This is it. cked uploaded the last 2 songs of Side A. This is all we have of All Lights Fucked on the Harry Amp Drooling. And you know what? It's okay. I like Dad Mom Daddy, but Ephraim was right. The album's weird, and it's not Godspeed. But, you know, it's still important, and it still deserves to be heard. There is also a huge thematic difference between the Godspeed we have and the All Lights Godspeed. The music we have is silent commentaries on society at large. They come off as an angry response to the socioeconomic and political issues that we face. While All Lights, at least the songs we have, are much more personal. Let's compare Mladic, my personal favorite song, to Dad Mom Daddy. Mladic, first of all, is named after Ratko Mladic, a former Bosnian military leader who was responsible for the Srebrenica massacre. Emotions are implied through the instrumentation, rage towards the inhuman actions, and depictions of those actions through the heavy distortion.
UN peacekeepers, mostly from the Netherlands, admitted to 60 Minutes correspondent Bob Simon that Mladic had fooled them.
The men, thousands of them, were bused to neighboring Serb villages, lined up and shot, hidden from the...
But that's the point. It's all up to abstract interpretation, but it still focuses towards consistent ideas and always springing in hope that things will get better. Dad Mom Daddy, on the other hand, seems to be a more personal tale of Ephraim's childhood growing up with a seemingly abusive father and then running away. I had a rough period from about the age of 17 to 23. I was homeless, broke, and fucked up, and everyone I knew was homeless, broke, and fucked up. My childhood was an apocalypse, but it had nothing to do with the world outside. It's impossible to know if this is a consistent theme throughout the album, but it's still an interesting contrast. The Tale of All Lights is honestly a familiar story. A local band makes a demo tape and releases a few copies during their shows. That band could then blow up or fizzle out, and that album could very easily go missing. But at the same time, we will probably never have another album like All Lights. Not musically, I mean. There is no shortage of noise rock. But the story. But at the same time, what's the big deal? I'm sure every artist has a weird demo tape that's never been released. No one really cares about Porter Robinson's first track, even though he talks about them all the time in interviews, or Animal Collective's old tapes that they shared around in high school. In 1911, a painting was stolen by an artist you might have heard of. It doesn't really matter. But the media spin on the event blew up an already pretty popular painting into legendary status. People would go to see an empty space where the painting used to be. The painting earned a reputation by being unavailable, and when it was eventually found, it was more about seeing something that everyone thought was gone forever. That painting is the Mona Lisa. Now, I've seen the Mona Lisa. It's fine. It's kinda small. This is the only picture I took of it because it's just way too crowded and I don't really care. The Louvre has better stuff. I've also heard all 8 minutes of All Lights fucked, and it's fine. It's a bit too noisy and it doesn't really go anywhere. Now, I'm not saying that All Lights is the Mona Lisa of music. I'm saying it's the Dark Souls of music. I'm saying that people crave what they can't have. It doesn't matter if All Lights is good or bad or whatever. It's just the fact that we can't have it that makes the album important. It's also just getting caught up in the hype. None of the people who look at the Mona Lisa today were alive at the time it was missing, but it's the most legendary painting. You gotta see it. I don't even like it, but I still took a picture. This goes back to the air of mystery around the band. I mean, if one of these songs was released as a single by a band that wasn't Godspeed, I would most likely skip out on the album.